We seek to minimize the iniquities of circumstances and ability, and we support a just distribution of nature's resources and the fruits of human effort so that as many as possible can enjoy a good life. Notice how is leaning on the idea of communist economics. We Christians affirm the idea of caring for the poor. However, we also affirm the idea of private ownership, and we believe that these resources should only be redistributed where it is the agreement of society to do so. It cannot be imposed as a principle. And where a society does not make that choice, the church should step up to care for those that the state is not looking after. Ladies and gentlemen, you argue for a belief, an ideal that you assert, but tell me why, without an appeal to a teleological sense of justice, that you can argue for redistribution of resources. Nature does not redistribute resources. Nature argues for survival of the fittest, argues that the strong dominates the weak, argues that the strong takes from the weak what it needs. So you're basing your values not on an observation of nature, you're basing your values on Christian teaching that you have inherited and are now claiming for your own. Ladies and gentlemen, the points of the criticism of the manifesto are as follows. It is epistemologically flawed. Human beings understand the world through the narrative, not through empirical science. It describes human society and targets as its loci of focus the wrong thing. It focuses on the individual. We say you should focus on the family. It says that the individual exists when it doesn't understand that the individual is a creation of community. It argues for metaphysics that it can't maintain, and it borrows those metaphysical claims from Christianity while trying to undermine Christianity. This entire argument could be summed up with a single phrase: cogito versus credo. The idea that I think, therefore I am, versus the idea that I believe. We Christians believe that the story you believe in is what forms you and what forms your society, and that is true of the idea of the credo of the Enlightenment. But the Enlightenment argues that through the credo we invent some kind of neutral position by which we can subject the world to a rational discourse about what is true, and that is not a valid argument because it is not true in itself. Any questions on the topic? Any questions? Go on.
Do you believe that, so you're talking about secular humanism,
Yeah.
do you believe that's a natural consequence of like the times, or do you believe there's like a satanic agenda pushing to destroy Christianity?
Right, so you're right on both ways. So secular humanism emerged out of a trauma of a Christian civil war. Christians fought one another in the Reformation, one another by their millions, and looked for a way to make that war stop. And is born is born out of the desire to make the Reformation war stop. Humanism, however, predates the Reformation. It emerged out of the Renaissance. Christians are the one that gave the world the study of the humanities. Christians gave the world the idea of the human subject. And the humanists have borrowed that idea and ran with it and politicized it in liberalism. And that is what the devil is using, the lie of to wage war against God and his holy church. Any other questions? Okay.
What's happened now in this,
So let me address your question. Yeah? Because that's a question that you've waited to ask. So how do we prove that? It's called the study of history. My statements are not controversial. Go and look up Tom Holland, a historian. He says what I am saying to you. Who's the historian that used to appear on Question Time? He now appears on GB News every now and then. He's got his own channel. It's David Starkey. David Starkey is another historian. He says the same thing. It is a settled opinion amongst historians that humanism emerged out of the Christian world in the Renaissance. But it was different at that time to what it is from today. And they do that by looking at historical documents that talk about it. The word humanism, humanities, was first written down by Christians in the Renaissance. When the Renaissance was born, the idea was that Christians wanted us to study other topics other than just theology and philosophy. And so we started studying human behavior. And out of that, you emerge the human sciences that many of you now study, like economics, sociology, psychology, and so on. Any other questions, ladies and gentlemen? Questions or comments? Yeah, go on, a question. I'm not having a debate, I'm taking a question. What's your question? No, what's your question?
No, wait.
What's your question?